Welcome back. The world's youngest nation, South Sudan, has been told to end its nightmare of war as new peace talks open in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. The East African Bloc of Intergovernmental Authority on Development convened the meeting for the landlocked country.
For agreement on new transitional arrangements.
Talks on the crisis in South Sudan began in Addis Ababa on the 5th of February as pressure mounts on leaders to take stronger action to end the country's 4-year civil war. The talks in Addis Ababa have been convened by the East African Bloc of the International Governmental Authority on Development, IGAD, to push the warring sides back to the negotiating table after a 2015 peace deal collapsed.
You must show a real political will and commitment to peace. It is your full responsibility. That is your country. This is your people. To save your country and your people, take more concrete, definite action. Make no mistake. You collectively, by your political and personal interest, are responsible for the nightmare your own people are going through. This really is the very last chance for you to accept your responsibilities and take the necessary action to ensure South Sudanese peace and prosperity.
Neighboring countries and African groups, such as the 8-member IGAD, are under increased pressure to sanction South Sudanese officials who undermine the peace process. The United States banned the export of weapons and defense services to South Sudan, stepping up pressure against Salva Kiir and signaling that Washington is losing patience with the young nation's leaders after repeated agreements to end the violence.
The cessation of hostilities agreement has outlined the measures, and these measures include travel bans in the region for parties that continue to jeopardize the peace process in South Sudan, and it includes asset freeze and also restrictions on flow of weapons to the country. And we believe these are strong measures that have been accepted in the cessation of hostilities agreement. And if there is any attempt to jeopardize the process and IGAD takes these steps, I think it will force the parties to reconsider their decisions and really contribute constructively to the search for peace in our country.
Tens of thousands of people have died, and a third of South Sudan's 12 million population have fled their homes after the 2013 war began.
Now let's get more on this from a senior lecturer in international relations at the Nasarawa State University, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze. Many thanks for your time. Now this is the latest attempt to end the civil war in South Sudan that has lasted for more than 4 years. Do you see this bringing a solution to the lingering crisis?
I don't think getting to hear the answer that crisis is much on leadership puzzle between some tribes in Sudan. And as long as Salva Kiir is afraid of sharing power, I think the crisis will continue for a long time to come. But based on the decision of the United Nations working with IGAD and the African Union, the way they decide to clamp down on both sides for a very long time. Get negotiate sanctions for most of their leaders. I think they will come back to their senses. But until that is done, I think we are yet to hear the last of that crisis. Notwithstanding the negotiation that is going on at this level.
Now, last week, the U.S. imposed an arms embargo on South Sudan, and the head of the African Union recently called for sanctions on those prolonging the conflict. Are sanctions the way to go?
Sanctions is the way to go. It is a veritable measure to call them to their senses, because even as the people are suffering, the leaders are living as usual. So they are not totally affected by the war. Juba is still bothering for them. So I think sanctions, that's the best way, because to get sanctions will require use of I know that we have the blue berets in South Sudan. The blue berets that the UN soldiers that are there, they too, they are having their own sides of the effects of the war. Many times their compounds have been bombarded by both sides. So I think the best thing to do in this circumstance, except to use force, is to apply sanctions. So I support sanctions.
Mr. Eze, if you remember, the last ceasefire between President Salva Kiir and several rebel groups was signed in December, but it lasted just a few hours. Why do you think that happened?
I think it happened because Salva Kiir is afraid of losing power. And is so suspicious of those behind him. And his opponents too. They think they've gone so far that they cannot allow their struggle to be in vain. So there is serious conflict. Those opposing him don't want to stop midway, and Salva Kiir don't want to lose out in the war. So I think with this conflicting interest, that was why that negotiation, that agreement, ended up in smoke. And the current one may not be better, except severe sanctions are applied on them. And the United Nations Security Council brings South Sudan case within Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter.
Now, let's talk about the impact of the crisis. Now, the continued strife is taking its toll on the most vulnerable. We've seen child abductions on the increase. What can be done to stop this ugly trend?
I think what can be done is to stop the war, because it is difficult for the children to be attending schools while war is raging. And that is what the international community is doing right now. And that is the best that can be done in the circumstance outside putting boots on the ground. And there is no country that feels so concerned as to put boots on the ground as to conquer the leadership or change the leadership. So the international community will continue to mount pressure through the United Nations, through IGAD, through the African Union, until these leaders become submissive. The truth is that they must share power. You cannot take what is happening to the children in isolation to what is happening concerning the war. So you must stop the war before the children can go to school. As long as the war rages, there is no short solution. The educational aspect of South Sudanese life will remain in limbo until that war comes to an end.
Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us on Network Africa. Elsewhere, Congo's Defense Ministry says a colonel who has threatened to depose President Joseph Kabila has been extradited from Tanzania and is to be prosecuted for rebellion. The Defense Minister, Crispin Atama Tabe, confirmed that John Tshibangu was in Kinshasa, where he would face justice. Last month, Tshibangu, who had been based in the east of Democratic Republic of Congo, gave the president a 45-day ultimatum to leave before he was then detained by authorities in Tanzania. Tshibangu used to be a military commander in the central Congolese region of Kasai. He defected in 2012 and moved to the lawless east, long a hunt of would-be Congolese rebels. And that's where we end today's program. Thank you for watching. I am BC Adebayo.